every day to change their lives. So here are the rights that we feel should be afforded to every home buyer in America. First, I believe, and we believe, that Americans have the right to save for home ownership tax-free. What do I mean? We believe that the Congress should create an individual home ownership development account, somewhat like the 401k plan or like the 529 educational savings plan, which allows people to invest money, pre-tax money, into an account, which account would be and could be matched by contributions from one's employer, earn interest on that account, and then at the point when you're ready to buy a home, you could take that money out, and if you invested it in a down payment on a first home, you could do it without payment of taxes. What would that allow? It would allow, at the time of birth of your child, for you to set up an account and put $25 aside a month, so that then when they're 20, 21, 22 years of age, they'd have money for a down payment on a home. It would allow young workers who sometimes struggle with paying rent and can't put that down payment together a special incentivized way to save money in order to purchase a new home, an individual home ownership development account. Of course, there are many details that I don't have time to address today, but the fundamental thought is that since down payments and the lack of a down payment is an important barrier to home ownership, especially for Black Americans and Brown Americans, then the nation should incentivize, should help, should assist, should help employers assist, workers and others, families and others, parents and others, to save so that they can make that crucial down payment on a first home. The second right is the right to high-quality home ownership education. Now, I doubt that many in this room may have felt the need to avail themselves of home ownership classes before they bought their first home. But imagine the fear, the trepidation, and the stigma of dealing with a fast-talking real estate agent for the first time. Imagine the fear and trepidation if there were many financial service companies seeking your business, sharing with you various products with all sorts of provisions. Imagine the trepidation when one began to talk about an MAI appraisal and the value of a home, and escrow, and taxes, and insurance, and the like. One barrier to home ownership, particularly in Black communities, but not only in African American communities, is knowledge and information. What we have learned is that home ownership education in this country has worked. What we also have learned about home ownership education is that it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't touch enough Americans. So we suggest today that in the home ownership education arena, a number of things happen. Currently, the HUD budget is $42 million a year for home ownership education or home ownership counseling. We suggest that Congress double that budget for this year. And we also suggest that Congress take another very important step, and that the financial services industry and the community-based organizations of America join with them. And that is to offer home ownership education after one closes on a home, so that the education remains, that the counselor remains. Why is that the case? Because it is important, and it is in no one's interest for foreclosures to rise. It's not in the interest of consumers. It's not in the interest of banks. It's not in the interest of neighborhoods. It's not in the interest of communities if foreclosures arise. So if one can reach out when they face a crisis in life that may lead to them falling behind on their mortgage, counseling and intervention, we think that can help stave off an increase in the foreclosure rate. Listen to these numbers that were shared with us by the Homeownership Preservation Foundation. Foreclosures today result primarily from three occurrences in a person's life. One, the loss of a job. This is particularly the case in the Midwest, where there's a decline in manufacturing. Second is that the person has an inappropriate product, meaning a monthly mortgage rate, escalation clauses, some provisions that don't match their abilities or don't match their profile. And third is a family crisis, such as divorce, separation, increasing in that area is acute illness where a person is uninsured. And they've got to choose between paying the mortgage or paying the medical bills, paying the mortgage or buying medicine. Why do I say this? Because we cannot allow ourselves to think that those that face foreclosure are somehow irresponsible, that those that face foreclosure somehow are walking away from their obligation and their responsibility. So we think homeownership education should make counseling available to people if they face a job loss, if they're in an inappropriate mortgage product, if they face a family crisis. The numbers show, and looking forward, from the Center for Responsible Lending, that as many as 10% of African Americans and 8% of Hispanics face the prospect of foreclosure in the very near future. Third is the right to truth and transparency in credit reporting. How many of you know your credit score? Raise your hand. Know it verbatim. You all are excellent, good, or telling a fib. How many of you know what Fair Isaac, Experian, and TransUnion are? Got a lot of housing experts in this room. To me, Fair Isaac sounds like a person from British mythology. Experian sounds like one of Saturn's moons, and TransUnion sounds like a new railroad. These are credit reporting agencies. The right to truth and transparency in credit reporting means that this industry has to demystify what goes into a person's credit report. Most people do not know, do not understand, and are not clear on what affects their credit to the bad or certainly to the good. Secondly, there's a high degree of inaccuracies in many Americans' credit reports. The question is, where does the responsibility lie? I think that there should be a system of penalties for inaccurate credit reporting on those that report or that those that publish the report. Why? Just a few points on a credit report can mean the difference between being eligible for a home or not, or being eligible for a certain mortgage product or not. This area needs to be demystified. To me, it's as complicated as the Pythagorean theorem or some mathematical formula, because there's no transparency, and you must be an expert to be able to understand it. And if it is a critical component of one's financial success, then Americans ought to understand it very easily, ought to be able to converse about it very easily, and ought to understand, one, how they can affect it, number two, how they can correct it, and number three, how it can be used for and against them in financial transactions. Number four is the right to production of affordable housing for working families. In many cities in America today, there is an affordable housing crisis. In many cities in America today, Washington, D.C. is an example where working families are being pushed to the suburbs, being pushed to the outer rings, because the price of housing in the city is increasing substantially. A few ideas here. We think Congress should consider creating a new tax credit called the Workforce Housing Tax Credit, which would allow tax credits